Happy Monday. Welcome to a new week. I hope you've had a great weekend and did things that rejuvenated you, brought you joy and happiness and love into your life. And I'm glad you're here with me to start your week on a brand new topic. And this week we're going to talk about the importance of being a hope dealer. Those of you who've been following me know that the hope dealer is kind of a moniker that we use here in my organization. We've got like merch that says the hope dealer. We're working on some projects around the idea of being the hope dealer. And today I'm going to talk to you about the origin of the hope dealer, what it means to me, and why it's so important. So welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. I'm your host, Elliott Connie. And so this idea of being a hope dealer actually had its origins in my childhood. Being born and spending a lot of time on the west side of Chicago, I saw a lot of things that potentially kids should not see. I saw a lot of activity where people were what I now know is dealing drugs, but at the time I didn't really know what it was. But there were people in the neighborhood and in the area that were obviously very popular and got a lot of attention. And as a kid, you look at that and you want that, right? You want to be popular and you want to be successful and you want to be able to achieve those things. And what was in front of me and what I could see was people who were achieving these things standing around on street corners. Now, again, at the time, I was at such a young, impressionable age, I didn't know that it was like that they were doing criminal and destructive activities. I just knew they were popular and had jewelry and nice cars and all those things. Later on in life, I realized that they were spreading destruction. They were dealing drugs and making people sick, ruining families, ruining lives. They were literally spreading destruction. And, I was in my 20s, my early 20s, late teens when I realized it's not cool to deal drugs. It ruins families. And I thought it would be cool if you could deal something that was constructive instead of destructive. Like I started having that thought. And, later in life, I became a psychotherapist and I started doing the work that I do. And I overcame some challenges in my own personal life related to depression and anxiety and sadness and suicidality and all of those things. And it became important to me to be the type of person that everybody that I met, whether it was professionally as a psychotherapist or just meeting people in my life, would experience a bit more hope in their lives, would experience a bit more hope in what they were trying to do. Because I thought I just wanted to be a person that spread. I wanted to be someone that, instead of spreading something that created destruction, just how cool would the world be if you could be someone that spread something that was constructive. And that was the genesis of it. That was the origin of the idea. So, you fast forward and I now, have a website and a pretty big following, and I teach people how to do solution-focused brief therapy. People go to my website and I hired this person who's remarkably brilliant, talented, and creative. And we started thinking of ideas for merch, t-shirts and sweatshirts and hats and, all the things that people have on their websites. And I thought, how cool would it be if we had like a sweatshirt and sweatpants and t-shirt that said Hope Dealer. So she got to work and started doing things that she does with her incredible imagination, and voila, and there it is. And I think it symbolizes so much how important it is to be someone that spreads the constructive idea of hope so that people can be hopeful in whatever it is they're trying to do and achieve in their life. And I want all of you to be hope dealers. I want all of you to be someone that, no matter who you talk to, your children, your friends, someone at work, your partners, like whatever the case may be, that those people would be better for having met and interacted with you. And one of the greatest ways to ensure that people are better off for having known you is that once they know you, their hope would increase. So that's the task. I think that's our job for being here on Earth, is making sure that we're interacting with people in a way that increases their hope. I think that means a lot here, and I want to push you guys to do that. So thank you so much for being here and taking time to listen to this podcast. I love you so much for it. Please spread this podcast on your social media platforms. Help me spread the word. Even if you just share it with one person that you think could hear this message and be better off today. Also, don't forget to become a subscriber. You can do that at Apple, Spotify, Simplecast. You can do that wherever it is you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Today I'm going to tell you This week we're talking about hope and something I refer to as being a hope dealer. And today I'm going to talk to you about the lowest, most hopeless moment of my life. And I'm not just telling you that just to be talking to you about a low, hopeless moment. I'm going to tell you how I bounced out of it. I'm going to tell you what happened to pull me out of it and what completely changed my life in the hopes that it will change yours too. So welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I'm going to be emotional today, I think. I've talked to you about my childhood and how there was a lot of abuse in my childhood. And the abuse was one thing, like the anger and the frustration and the physical situations that I found myself in from receiving my father's parenting. What was worse was the control. I felt like life wasn't mine. Like every single thing I did was micro-scrutinized. And usually from a you're not good enough perspective. Literally everything. And I couldn't wait. Once I got to a point where I knew college was going to be in my future, was a bit touch and go for a while there. Once I knew college was going to be in my future, I couldn't wait to get to college because I thought this would be the first moment of freedom. Like I'm living on a college campus away from my father, and life will be mine. I can make whatever decisions I can make. In fact, I remember a moment when I got dropped off. First college I went to was University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. And I remember my dad drove me to the campus. He took me to my dorm room, and then he took me to a store where we bought toiletries and things that I would need. And then he brought me back to the campus, and we drove around the campus. And then he drove me to the student union building where we said our goodbyes, and he drove away. And I remember thinking, this is the very first time in my life where whatever I do, wherever I go next is mine and mine alone. I could walk into the student union building and hang out with other students. I could walk back to my dorm room and get to know the people that I'm sharing a suite with. Literally what decision I make next is mine. But then over the next few weeks, my dad would call me literally every morning, and he would wake me up and he would say, "What are you doing?" I'd say, "I'm sleeping." He'd say, "Get up, you should be studying, you're in college." Or I would be up and he'd say, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm up studying." "You should have studied last night." So that feeling of control and I'm not good enough followed me to the place where I thought was going to be freedom. It was tough. My dad bought me a beeper, and then every time he beeped me, which is literally 4 or 5 times a day, if I didn't respond to it right away, which was hard to do because I didn't have a cell phone because they weren't around then, and I didn't have a phone in my room, it was just really, really tough. And I remember one day, my teacher said, "Your dad has called me. I'm not allowed to talk to him. Tell him to stop calling." I remember one day I was sitting in the dorm and my football coach came to my dorm and he was like, "Your dad couldn't get a hold of you, so he called us." And I felt hopeless and suicidal, actually, because I just couldn't feel like this was ever going to end. It was one of the worst, lowest feelings of my life because the solution I thought was to move out of my house and move into a college dorm room. And here I am in a college dorm room, and this control has followed me. And that was the moment I think I was at my absolute lowest. That was the moment where I didn't think there was any coming back from. That was the moment where I thought death was actually the best way out. But something happened. I got the opportunity to move many, many states away. Texas, actually. My mom was not doing well from a health perspective. My family mostly lived in Chicago. I was in Massachusetts at the time. And the family decided that my mother was going to move to Texas to be around one of her siblings. So we had a support system. My younger brother was in high school at the time. I decided to go. I decided to leave the university I was at and go to Texas and kind of start over. The impactful thing about that was it was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable to do this thing. The easiest thing in the world for me to do would have been to stay in Massachusetts. I was familiar with Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts. I understood Massachusetts, but I was comfortable in a hopeless state. And I remember waffling, going back and forth between whether or not I wanted to go to Texas or stay in Massachusetts. I went back and forth and talked to my best friend, Kyle. I was like, "Man, I'm going to go. Man, I'm going to stay. Man, I'm going to go." And I ultimately decided to go. And someone asked me, "Why are you moving?" And I said, "Because it's different." And that changed my entire life. I think too often people stay uncomfortable. I think too often People stay comfortable to avoid being uncomfortable because we fear that feeling. Like, it's not nice, it's not fun, it's not exciting, but doing the uncomfortable thing will often lead you to a new experience. And that is certainly the case with my life. So if you can hear my voice, I want you to understand, like, it's okay to be hopeless at times. I know there were times in your life you felt hopeless too. But trust yourself and your strength and your courage and do things that will make you uncomfortable. I promise it'll change your life. Thank you for being here and listening to this episode of the Aha Moments. Please help me spread the word by sharing this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. If each one of you shared this on your social media once a day, it would be amazing and reach many more people. So please help me by doing that. And also subscribe. You can do that at Apple Podcasts, Simplecast, Google, Spotify, wherever it is you enjoy listening to your podcast. I would really appreciate it. And also become a Patreon subscriber where you get bonus episodes and transcriptions of each and every episode. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Love y'all. Today I might get a little bit controversial. And not that I think the figure I'm going to talk about is too terribly controversial, but over time they've definitely become polarizing. But I think they're such a wonderful example of hope and being a hope dealer and being a spreader of hope that I'm going to use this person as an example, and I'm going to explain my case, and I think that you will understand. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and today I want to talk to you about Barack Obama. You know, when I was a kid, I'll never forget my 5th grade classroom. I was a hyper mischievous kid. Like, I wouldn't say I was bad or misbehaved, but I was certainly mischievous. I have to own and admit that. And a lot of my teachers would make me sit in the front of the classroom so they could keep an eye on me. And I'll never forget, in my 5th grade class, I sat in the very first row towards the left. And there was a door directly in front of me in this class that had a poster on it. On the poster were all of the American presidents up to Reagan. I think Reagan was the president when I was in the 5th grade. So that was it. It was at the door. I sat right in front of this poster every single day. And I can remember looking at that poster as a 5th grader thinking that the American presidency is only for white men, because for 200 years, at that point, there had been like 40 presidents, and all of them had been white men. And there's a poster representing this, like, right in front of my face. And then years later, Barack Obama gets elected president. And the first thing I thought about was that poster. When Barack Obama got elected president, the first thing I thought about was that poster now has something other than a white male on the poster. And it was really touching to me, because what a horrible thought that is for a 5th grader to think that that job is not available to him simply because of race. I assume the same thing is true for women, because of gender. But I remember that thought that, like, I'm not eligible for this job because I don't look like every other person on this poster. And Barack Obama shattered that. His victory shattered that. The night he won, Jay-Z was being interviewed, the rapper Jay-Z, who happens to be my favorite rapper. And the interviewer, they were talking about, like, what it means to have someone like Barack Obama in office. And the interviewer asked Jay-Z, like, what do you think it means? And Jay-Z said, Barack Obama just killed the American gangster, the black American gangster. And the interviewer was kind of taken back by this response. Said, what do you mean by this? And he said, when you're growing up in that environment and you look around, the most successful people you see are like gangsters. And he said, of course you aspire to be whatever the most successful thing you can see is. From now on, people can look at someone that looks like them in the White House, and it changes what people are able to aspire to. Once again, I thought about that poster. I thought about 5th grade kids, young black 5th grade kids now, looking at this poster and seeing a picture that looks like them, because it changes what you aspire to. Regardless of your political views, regardless of whatever it is you think about decision-making, that sort of thing, what Barack Obama's victory represented was a changing in what black youth saw in their future. Now, he actually talked about hope. I think hope was like on his, posters when he was campaigning. But I'm actually just talking about simply the matter of representation, simply the matter of that man getting that job at that time and what it means for people going forward. An entire generation of people can look at that poster and see themselves. I've thought about that poster a lot of times over the years, and I've sometimes wondered, what would I be had that poster looked more diverse? What would I be if the world looked more diverse? It's an important thing to me, and I wonder, what's the world going to be like now that fifth graders now look at a poster and see someone that looks like them? And I hope one day that poster will have females on it. I hope one day that poster will have everybody that represents everything that this country is. But that's how you spread hope. You give people something new to aspire to. So you know what I would love? I would love for you to think about what has happened in your life that has changed what you hope for and aspire to? What people have you looked at and saw that inspired you and caused you to want to be something bigger, better, and brighter? I think that's a wonderful thing, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are about that. So thank you for being here and listening to this podcast. I really can't even tell you how much it means to me. Please continue to help me reach more people and share this podcast on your social media platforms, or even with one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that wherever it is you enjoy podcasts: Apple, Google, Simplecast, Spotify, wherever. And also you can become a Patreon subscriber, where you get bonus content and transcriptions of each and every episode. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Today I want to talk about the impact of hope. So what happens when you start increasing and focusing on the hope in your life? Well, there are two main things that happen. They're both really positive, they're both really wonderful, they're both really necessary in our lives, and that's what I'm going to be sharing today. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So what happens when you start really focusing on and becoming hopeful in your life? The first thing that happens is you become more determined. You become more capable. You become more able to do things. Now, I'm going to reference something, and I probably shouldn't because I can't remember exactly what it was, but somebody did a study about mice. And they took a mouse, or several mice, and they put them in a tub of water. And they let the mouse struggle until it was just on the brink of drowning. Right at the moment where the mouse gave up and began to sink and was no longer trying to stay at the surface because they had no more energy and they were going to succumb to the water. And then they pulled the mouse out and dried it off, and they wanted to see how much time it took for the mouse to give up. And it took about 15 minutes. And then they dried the mouse off and took care of it and nursed it back to health. And then they put it in the water again. And this time the mouse lasted 20 hours. So what's the difference? What was the difference between the first time they put the mouse in the tub of water and the second time? And the scientists concluded that because in the second time they had the experience of being saved, the second time they were in the tub of water, they were in the tub of water with hope that they would be saved again, which significantly increased the likelihood that they would be saved. So they kept going. And that's what hope does. It makes you more tenacious, makes you more resilient, it makes you more determined, makes you more capable so that you can do things that you otherwise would not have been able to do. And hope is always there. You might not pay attention to it, but hope is always there. When I was in college, I did some really hard things. I stayed up all night studying, and I took some really hard tests, and I wrote some really long papers, and I did all of these really difficult, challenging, hard things because I had hope that if I did these things, I would get a college degree. And I had another layer of hope that if I got a college degree, I would get a job that I would be pleased with. So that's the impact. Without that layer of hope, without me thinking about those things, there's no way I could have stayed up all night. There's no way I would have been able to continue on the journey. There's no way I would have been focused on those things. There's no way I would have been able to follow through. But that's what hope does. It increases your capacity. And you have to figure out a way to focus on what you're hopeful for and not focus on the pain and the difficulties. And I think the second thing that hope does when you increase hope in your life is it increases your life satisfaction. Because when you are focused on the things that please you and the things that you're hopeful to achieve and the things that you want to accomplish, when you focus on those things, you're just happier and you're just a more grounded, more secure person. And I think life is just better from that perspective. So if you want to increase your life satisfaction and your happiness, sometimes it's not a matter of shifting what's going on in your life. Sometimes it's a matter of shifting what you're noticing about what's going on in your life. Because once you start paying attention to hope, it starts having a drastic impact on your life. Both the part of your life that is about what you want to achieve, but also about the part of your life that's about what you're currently experiencing. Like, it's always there, we just don't always notice it. So if you want to be happy, you want to be fulfilled, you want to have joy, spend some time in your day paying attention to hope. So just as I gave you an example of hope always being there, and there were times in my life when I didn't notice it, I want you to look around and look in your life for evidence that hope is present and practice paying attention to it, practice noticing it. Thank you for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. Please help me spread the word of this podcast. It would mean the world to me. You can do that on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also, don't forget to become a subscriber. You can do that at Apple, Spotify, Simplecast, Google has podcasts, wherever it is you enjoy listening to your podcast. And don't forget, you can become a Patreon subscriber where you'll get bonus episodes and transcriptions from each and every episode. I love you so much. Thanks for being here. I'll see you tomorrow. Today I'm going to talk about a really big idea. You know, as we talk about this week being a spreader of hope, a term I refer to as hope dealer, I want to talk about what my biggest hopes are, what the biggest wish I have for this world are. And it's such a big deal. It's such a grandiose idea. It's actually difficult to say out loud. It's actually a hard thing to be able to admit and acknowledge openly, but I think it's really important. So that's what I'm going to share here today. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So I'm just going to come out and say it. My biggest wish for Earth, my biggest wish for all of us here, is that we could live in a world that was absent discrimination, racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, all facets of oppression. And the reason why I think this is so significant is because so many of the root of our problems reside in oppressive behaviors. So much of what we get wrong is related to the way that we prejudge people. And I would love to live in a world where that were not happening. I also think that this is a problem that dehumanizes you, and there's no feeling in the world like being dehumanized. And it's something that I would love to see not happen in this world. I can remember the first time I ever felt discriminated against. I'll never forget it. When I was growing up, my mother was a single mom and she had to work. So me and my two brothers would often spend time with babysitters. And after school, we would go to the babysitter's house. And my mom got off from work. She would go pick us up at the babysitter's house. And some babysitters, my brothers and I really liked. They had fun games, or they had kids themselves we could play with, or they had a big backyard we could play in or whatever. And some babysitters we didn't like as much. We would have to sit and watch soap operas with that babysitter because they didn't have a kid-friendly environment in their home. One babysitter in particular was our favorite. We loved going to this babysitter's house. She had a big backyard and she gave us, treats and all the things that you would love when you're about, 6, 7 years old. I believe I was in the 4th grade or so whatever age I was at the time. We just really loved going there. And then all of a sudden we stopped going. No explanation. My mother didn't say anything. We just stopped going and we went to another babysitter. And occasionally in our lives that happened. You go from one babysitter to the next, and that's just reality. And then one day we were driving past the street where I knew this babysitter lived. And I asked my mom, I'm sitting in the back seat, and I asked my mom, how come we don't go to that babysitter's house, the one we enjoyed? How come we don't go to that babysitter's house anymore? And rather than answer me right away, my mom paused. I can literally remember this now. I can close my eyes and see it. My mother paused and she thought for a minute, and I watched her facial expression as if her heart broke. I was looking at her in the rearview mirror, And I now realize she was trying to decide, do you tell my, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, whatever age I was, what happened or not? And she took a deep breath and she said her landlords found out she was babysitting young black children and told her if she continued doing that, he would evict her from her house. So we couldn't go there anymore. And I still remember that feeling of like just feeling less than human. Like there's nothing I can do about that. Like there's literally nothing I can say or do. Human nature is if you tell me that I've done something wrong or offended you in some sort of way, human nature is like, I want to fix the problem. But you're now telling me that there's something wrong with me that is unfixable. And that feeling was so horrible. I want to live in a world where no one has to feel that feeling anymore. I want to live in a world where all of us are judged by who we are, what we do. I want to live in a world where no one is dehumanized for something like their gender, their race, their sexuality, their ability. Like, I want to live in a world where your virtue matters more than your outward appearance. And I'm afraid we're far away from that. Like, I'm afraid we're a long way from that. But that is still my big, grandiose, best hope for this planet. And the only thing I can say is the best thing we can do to get there is to understand that we have to be kind to our neighbors, regardless of how they outward appear, because that's the only way that we can live in a world like that. So thank you for listening to my big, huge idea, because I think we all could be committed to it. It would change everything. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here today. I love you guys so much. Please help me spread the word by sharing this podcast on your social media platforms, or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And become a subscriber. You can do that at Apple. You can do that at Simplecast, Spotify, Google, even wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts. And you can also become a Patreon subscriber, where we have bonus episodes and transcriptions of each and every episode. So head on over to Patreon and become a subscriber. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday. Love you guys.